This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
And now, on with the show.
Hey everyone, welcome to
We're watching here.
This is Opinionated Movie Talk with Chris and Perry. My name is Chris Williams. With me, he's the silly games to my kung fu fighting, Perry Seibert.
That's very entertaining based on something I'm going to say later.
Today we are going to be continuing our catch-up of 2020 films. We're going to be talking about Steve McQueen's Lover's Rock. We're going to be talking about Darius Martyr's Sound of Metal and Eliza Hittman's Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. Maybe not in that order, though. But before we do that, Perry, today was a big day for the Film Critics Society we're a part of, the Detroit Film Critics Society. They announced the top films of 2020, and I'm sure you saw the list. You voted with me.
I did indeed. Our year-end awards are up and ready to be perused and argued about and discussed and tweeted.
And I hope you like Nomadland. So, because that's all over.
Yeah.
And I mean, I obviously it was my number one film of the year, but I could have gone with maybe Carey Mulligan as Best Actress.
I voted very specifically to try to push other films.
Okay.
Figuring that Nomadland was getting more than enough support. I'm as I said, I think I said this when we talked about it. I think there's no doubt at this point Nomadland is the odds-on favorite for the actual Oscar for Best Picture at this point. Not that it's a lock, but I think it's the odds-on favorite, and that's fine. I felt much the same way about Parasite. I'm like, that's fine. It's not my favorite film of the year, but I understand why it gets this praise, and I'm fine with that. I want that kind of film to be awarded and rewarded.
Sure. I'm really glad at the showing Minari had, which you can listen to our episode that talked about Minari, First Cow, and Nomadland. But that won a few. I was really happy that we went with Delroy Lindo, though. For that.
Yes, I'm very happy with our actor and supporting actor choice. Yeah. I am thrilled with both of those selections, and I can live with the rest, unlike other years in which I want to publicly say, I really didn't vote to support this in any capacity. I don't have that feeling this year. That is not what I'm saying about this year's set of winners.
That is very good. I was just really happy that enough people saw Dick Johnson Is Dead to vote that for Best Documentary, because that was my pick, and I thought I was kind of going out on a limb there.
You were right on the money.
I was right on the money. And so you can go back. We've talked about several of the nominated films on prior podcasts. So we have an episode on Da 5 Bloods. We have an episode on Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, on One Night in Miami, First Cow, Nomadland, Minari. Go back and check. We've talked about all these, and who knows, in the next few weeks, we might talk about more of them. So, Perry, before we move on to talk about more 2020 catch-ups, what have you been watching lately?
I will yet again was asked to appear on an episode of Cathode Ray Mission, and we are doing, I don't want to say a definitive dive, because I think the gentleman who runs that podcast thinks this is too big a filmography to commit to one episode on. So we're going to be flitting around the filmography of Steven Spielberg.
Oh, wow.
And that has forced me to go back through some stuff that I haven't watched in a very long time, sometimes since it first came out. And so I had two very interesting experiences with early 21st century Spielberg. I revisited AI and The Terminal. Okay. And was pleasantly surprised by my reaction to both in different ways. The Terminal is even better than I remembered. The Terminal really only suffers from having a gaudishly hissable bad guy, brilliantly played by Stanley Tucci. Like it's lazy. It's the only aspect of the film that's lazy. And I'm not talking about his performance. I just mean that character. That character just fluctuates It's whatever the movie needs at that moment that character is. Mm-hmm. And so it's a screenplay issue. That said, I really like sort of trapping Spielberg in one place and making him make that terminal interesting visually for 2 hours. And it is the kind of performance most actors couldn't get away with. And Tom Hanks is very good in it.
Yes.
That accent should disqualify you from serious consideration for much of anything. And yet it plays. He makes it work, both as that guy's voice and obviously using it for comedic timing. It's a really interesting movie. I remembered it being interesting. I'd never gone back to it. And I had warmer feelings for it than I remembered, with the same caveat of, Stanley Tucci's fantastic at this, and he might as well just be twirling his mustache throughout most of it. Like this is a better film than that.
I don't think I've seen that since it came out on home video, which is the only time I saw it. I didn't see it in the theaters. And I remember liking it. I just never, it's another one of those ones I just never went back to. What did you think of AI? I'm always curious about people's reaction to that.
AI was another interesting revisit. I think it's the first time I've seen it since I saw it in the theater.
Okay.
I might have watched it the week it came out on DVD. I don't remember. I don't own it, so I don't think I did. It is weird and really, really idiosyncratic. Nobody else would have made it. It is interesting how often Spielberg approximates Kubrick without ever really feeling like Kubrick. And I will say that the flaw that I remember at the time still holds for me, and it's that Spielberg is at his heart really, he is childlike. He's always been childlike, and I don't necessarily intend to mean that he's immature. I just mean that the fault for me in the film, for all of its grand ideas, comes down to the fact that he cannot conceive of love from a child being anything more than the need to be loved.
Oh, interesting.
And there's a weird miss there that is not emotionally correct for the case he lays out at the front of the film about what this film is. It just doesn't work. It falls apart because he's not willing to tackle what really is love then. What is the responsibility to a thing you love? But he's not programmed to be loved. He's programmed to love.
Right.
So it's off. It's just there's just a misfire for me in the emotional thrust of the story. I want to just follow the mom. I don't care that the kid wants to be loved because he's a robot. He's not a kid. I am not emotionally invested in this journey at all. It is only an intellectual exercise, and he fails to follow the question that he's posing. So it falls apart as that. All that said, man, it doesn't look like anything else. It doesn't feel much like anything else. I mean, in general and in the Spielberg catalog, it's a fascinating movie, and I like how idiosyncratic it is. It's the first time he'd taken a screenplay credit since Close Encounters.
Yeah.
So
no, didn't he write the screenplay, or at least did the story for Poltergeist?
Oh, I meant of a film he directed. Yes, okay, he has a screenplay credit on Poltergeist. Yes, but I mean,
yes, Close Encounters.
Meaning this is really personal in a way that many of his films are not.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating movie, and the last thing I'll say is that Jude Law remains a god. I love Jude Law, and this is it's nice to remember why.
I love him in that. I'm due for a revisit to AI. It's one I go back to every few years because it is one of those ones that the things I love, but there's always there's something that keeps me from like totally loving it. And I can never figure it out. And I think what you said was something I want to keep in mind when I watch it again, which I need to restart my Spielberg series. And when we get to where we're at, I can probably talk more about that. But yeah, that's one I'm looking forward to revisiting again.
What have you been watching, Chris?
Oh man, I was having a hard time picking one for this. So I've watched a lot with my kids, but I really don't want to talk about watching Goonies because I got in trouble the other night when I said it's not good. I'm going to preface that.
It's not terrible, but it's not good.
And I enjoy the Goonies. I have a lot of nostalgia and a lot of love for it. I watched it with my son. It's great to watch with a 9-year-old. But I got you would have thought I had kicked a puppy when I said Goonies isn't good, even though I followed that up with it plays for a 9-year-old. So I watched that. I watched SpongeBob movie with my kids, and the only thing worth saying about that is it's the least weird SpongeBob movie there is, even though it has Keanu Reeves as a talking tumbleweed. But the one I want to talk about is last weekend, we took our kids to the Henry Ford Museum. And we got a pass to go there and Greenfield Village over the summer. And while we were there, we decided to go see an IMAX movie. And they had, one of those 45-minute documentaries. It was about people teaching kids about the wilds of America, narrated by Morgan Freeman. And, as a movie, it's a 45-minute IMAX documentary. There's nothing really spectacular to the content, to what you're learning. But oh my gosh, Perry, after sitting and watching movies on my TV or laptop for the last year, to sit in front of, because the Henry Ford IMAX is one of those giant, I think it's the biggest screen in Michigan, one of those giant screens, crystal clear projection, 3D. Man, it was like a religious experience. Like there were shots that were in space. There was up close, to bugs. There were, shots in the woods, and it was so great. And my kids were just, my son's been to IMAX movies before. Like he's been to the Limax movies at AMC. Like that's how he saw Endgame and a few other things. But he hasn't seen an IMAX movie like this. And my daughter, who is fascinated by space, had never been to an IMAX movie.
Wow.
They both like just came out like I felt like I was in the movie, and it was great and it was so much fun. And yeah, just to be remembered that movies can give you that experience, which it even just was something that is so, on the surface, such a, 45-minute easy thing that would be a feature on 60 Minutes if it wasn't for the cameras used and things like that. But so much fun to do that. I loved doing that. Moving on to smaller screens, we are continuing our catch up of films from 2020. Although I think a lot of times now it's 2020, first 2 months of 2021. Time means nothing anymore.
As we talked about, I follow the Oscar calendar. If it came out between January 1, 2020 and February 28th, 2021, it's a 2020 release. Time means nothing. But we're going really far back for our first movie we're going to talk about, because from what I remember, Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always was the talked about movie at last year's Sundance. Indeed.
In 2020. So we're talking pre-pandemic everything. All the critics were talking about Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, which is now available to stream on HBO Max, as well as I think rental at most places. Perry, this film had not been on my radar to talk about until with our last episode, you had it as your we're watching pick.
Yeah.
So we decided to talk about that. You were very taken with it, and I'm wondering if you could kick us off by telling the people what this movie is about and why you liked it so much.
This is the third film from writer-director Eliza Hittman. It stars a young woman named Sydney Flanagan as Autumn, a teenager who discovers she is pregnant. And the entire film is about how she scrapes up enough money and goes with her cousin, played by Talia Ryder, named Skylar, to New York City. Philadelphia. It's Philadelphia. New York City?
No, she leaves Pennsylvania to go to New York City.
That's right. That's how that works. So that she can get an abortion. And it's about what a 17-year-old goes through trying to get an abortion. And it's played at this incredibly unheightened level. It is flat. And I mean that I just mean that it is realistic. that it is realism writ large, or writ very small in this case. It's the kind of movie where I can barely remember a score. It's not. I don't think of music when I think about the movie. It is just about the. It is watching the behavior of these two teenage girls and figuring out their relationship through very, very elliptical conversations and scenes. We understand why they're doing things they do. Both of the young actresses are superb. And I was never less than engaged. I wanted to keep going with them no matter what they were doing. And the film very smartly always has this threat, sometimes more present than others. There is just this ongoing assault of masculinity that's not played in any obvious way at all. It's super subtle, with one possible exception. the father issue. The father character is the only thing that is on the nose in this movie. Mm-hmm. And it's jarring at first. It really did kind of bother me early. I'm like, wow, this is really obvious in a film that's not being obvious about much of anything. And then that pays off.
Yes.
In the absolute best sequence in the movie, from which the movie takes its title. And I don't wish to say anything more than that, because anything more than that to me, I think, is kind of spoilers for that sequence. It's just this. This is the film. This does everything for me that Nomadland does for most people. All of the reservations I have about Nomadland, which we've talked about in the past, and Nomadland's great. I want to say again, Nomadland is great, but I don't love Nomadland. I love this because it is that granular, and I think it tells just as big a story. And I think it shows me a person that I don't often see on American movie screens, which is a pregnant 17-year-old girl trying to figure out what she's going to do about it. And not written in Diablo Cody speak. It is just it is naturalistic and at the same time very low-key. It is not like a Cassavetes film. It's not a series of acting exercises. It is just this incredibly low-key personal examination of this character, and it really works for me.
This one again was one that came out last year. It was in those days when releases were kind of nebulous, like when does a movie come out anymore, where is it at, and it kind of got lost in the shuffle for me. So I was glad to see it was on HBO Max. This one hit me hard. This was I don't want to say it's a tough sit. Like it is not misery porn. It is not look how horrible life is. But it's not also flippant at all. I grew up, this is going to surprise no one who's listening to our show. I grew up in culture where abortion was the number one topic. It determined how you voted. It determined so much of your philosophy in life. And, I grew up and I realized, there's still wrestlings that I have philosophically, theology with it. But oh my gosh, Perry, this movie should be required watching for anyone who is going to stand on a picket line.
Yeah.
The thing that kept going through my mind when I was watching this was Roger Ebert's quote about movies being empathy generating machines. Because this is a deeply empathetic movie. This is a movie that just watches these two girls go, on this journey to New York. And it's deeply empathetic in the fact that it watches and studies them. It still gives them a modicum of privacy. That scene you're talking about is amazing, not so much for anything that's revealed, but for what's held back.
Yeah.
The privacy it still allows. But it's also a movie about empathy, about, how uncaring some people can be, how threatening some people can be. but about how much it matters too when someone just listens or when someone is just there. There are 2 shots in this movie of people holding hands that I think are among the most moving things I've seen. This movie kind of knocked me flat because it wasn't what I was expecting. I don't really know exactly what I was expecting. But I was expecting something, I don't know, a little more talky. I guess it's the only thing. I knew it was kind of a road trip type thing. So in my head, I'm thinking, oh, it's a sadder Booksmart, maybe. Which is totally not this movie.
No, that is not this movie.
But what really amazed me was the relationship between these 2 girls and how, like you said, you know what they're doing, what they have to do. You know exactly how they care about each other. You probably figure out their history. And there are very few sequences at all where they say more than 2 words to each other.
Yeah.
Like there is hardly any dialogue in this thing. And yet you understand their nuances and dynamics so well. And I had not seen, I'm looking for the name too, Sydney Flanagan. I hadn't seen her in anything, and she carries so much weight behind those eyes that she has.
Yeah.
That scene you talk about is, I think it's my second most powerful moment in the movie. There's another moment that has to do with it's one of the holding hands ones. And I'll just say it's the kiss scene.
Yes, I know. I figured that's where you were. Yes.
That hit me hard too. But she's so good in this. When that camera just lingers on her, just the way she sells that's hard. And she does really solid work.
It is. I've talked about before why Taxi Driver is my favorite film. And it's because it pulls off the miracle feat of never giving you any backstory. Mm-hmm. Outside of the opening scene where Travis interviews for the taxi driver job, you learn no discernible hard facts about him, about what he was going through, nothing. And that is the absolute same in this movie. It is all you are discovering the character through behavior.
Yeah.
Entirely. There is no point where you stop and you get told what has happened. Mm-hmm. And that is always rewarding because it puts such faith in the audience.
Yeah.
It puts so much trust and faith that an audience will follow and will pay attention, and we will.
Yeah. The thing I liked about that too, about not knowing everything about her, including like details that you would think this movie would spill for you.
Yes.
It's such a cop out sometimes to make a movie that says, no, we're going to consider someone in this position and what she goes through. And then you kind of argue people into, well, this is her situation, so I can be okay with this. This is her situation, so this. No, it says be okay with this because she's a human being going through this situation. We're not going to give you that easy out of saying, well, this is under my little loophole of where I'm okay about things. Mm-hmm. It's say, no, pay attention to her. It is her situation. She is a human being. I really, again, whenever movies deal with abortion, I kind of get my hackles up because I really just worry it's going to be a political movie. It's going to be a statement movie. And this movie is political in the fact that it makes an argument for better healthcare and better, a better process, but it does that in a way that never once comes out and says, we're arguing for better healthcare. We're arguing for better. It does that through humanity, through. Yep. Yeah, I really liked this. I like the motif that kind of runs through of switching off carrying luggage, just a small thing, and it's one of those bits of symbolism that I could just be way too heavy-handed, but it works so well here. I really, really liked this movie. I wish I had seen it before I voted.
Oh,
I know.
Hearing that, I wish you had too.
I know. Oh,
I had it all over my ballot.
Oh. It is pretty great. I don't even know if there's much more to say.
No, other than seek it out. It really is a special movie. It is not what you're expecting. It was not what I was expecting. And I was looking forward to seeing it. I remember it was one of those first films that it was like, it's $20 to rent. Right when the pandemic started, when they tried that, and I was like, oh, I want to, and there is nobody else in my household who wants to see this. I have a hard time plugging that down as much as I want to see this. So I was very thankful when it showed up on HBO Max. That's how I watched a few months ago. And it really is a special movie.
It is. I highly recommend it. HBO Max, if you're already subscribing for Tom and Jerry, come on, do it
Please.
for this. Yeah.
Please.
There's kind of a theme in these 3 movies that we're talking about this week. They are all movies that are not what I expected at all. And moving into our second movie, I can say this is one that I saw in the fall that just knocked me flat on my ass when I saw it, because the director it came from, this is not what I expected from him. So Steve McQueen actually did 5 films this year, all available on Amazon Prime. It is his Small Axe series of films. They all tackle some segment of Black life in London over the last few decades. Lovers Rock is the second movie that was released in that anthology. It basically follows a house party, the formation, duration, and kind of after events of that party in a London suburb in the, I believe it's early 1980s is what I believe.
I'm not sure. The only hard clue I have is it's definitely after 1974.
Okay. But yeah, it just follows the events of this house party. This is a movie, like I said, it knocked me flat when I saw it. Steve McQueen, Perry, is a director who he has made films that have ended up on my top 10 list a few times. I really like Shame. I really like 12 Years a Slave. I really like Widows. 2 of those 3 movies, as much as I like them, I will never watch again because they are such arduous experiences. And what surprised me about Lovers Rock is it is a very lovely, vibrant, and alive movie. I think when I wrote my review, I called it the most alive thing I had seen last year. So how did you feel about Lovers Rock, Perry?
I am less enamored of McQueen as you are. I thought Hunger was an endurance test. I think Shame. It's really interesting to talk about Shame and Never Rarely, Sometimes Always in the same episode, because for me, Shame gets wrong because of its style everything that Never Rarely, Sometimes Always gets right. And 12 Years a Slave is, I think, unimpeachably necessary and great and important. Just for its sheer existence, it's kind of impossible to argue that. But and Widows is. I remember when Widows came out, a friend of mine online said, "Oh, go see it. It's fun." I said, "Is it really fun, or is it Steve McQueen's idea of fun?" And she said, "Okay, it's Steve McQueen's idea of fun, which means it's not fun. There's no fun." And the shocking thing to watch this is to realize that Steve McQueen can actually film pleasure.
Yeah,
I did not know he was capable, and I still have my issues. I have said on this podcast in the past that in Steve McQueen's cinematic universe, nobody has sex without crying afterwards. That's the only reaction, and that's still true in this movie. So let's be real clear.
Okay,
with all of the crosses around. There is still a lot of religious guilt going on in this movie. Okay. That said, yes, there are actual moments of genuine pleasure. It is remarkable how much of this 71 minutes is devoted to just watching people dance.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be a good 25 minutes of the 71 minutes is literally just watching, and not in any sort of like, now they're dancing with that person. There's no drama like that going on. You are just admiring the human form dancing, which is a pleasure, especially in this form, especially for something that's only 71 minutes. It's the kind of thing that makes me, we have complained a lot about streaming services, but boy, the opportunity's there to throw money at filmmakers and let them do short works. I would love to see 40-minute, 30-minute, 55-minute movies from big-time directors who just have a story that's all they need. They don't need 2 hours. I would love for Netflix and all of the streaming services to go in the other direction instead of saying, "Ooh, you get 10 hours to tell your story." Hey, do you only need 25 minutes? Go for it. Here,
Yeah.
I'm just as likely to hang in there for another month if you give me that than you give me 10 hours of something that I don't want to slog through just because it's 10 hours long. So yeah, for a lot of reasons, this is so worth checking out. And man, if you love reggae music, whoo, wow, what a soundtrack. That's the reason the movie's made. It is an ode to reggae music and a great one. Yeah, it's really good, and it is shocking that it is by Steve McQueen in so many ways.
It is. It's very warm and there's danger lurking at the edges. You do understand that them going to this party is an escape in many ways, and there are certain shots out to the community that make you aware of what's going on at the edges, or after the party's over, it kind of hints that life is not the people who are all swagger on the dance floor are not necessarily that way when they go back to work the next day.
Mm-hmm.
This is their escape. This is their way to celebrate culture, celebrate their background, without oppression or anyone picking on them. I love even the early stretch of this where it's just watching people get the party ready. They're cooking food, they're singing, they're getting all the speakers set up. Like you said, the middle half of this is almost just completely dancing. Like you said, it's just bodies in motion. It feels a lot looser for him, but he's still very focused on how he's composing everything and what he's capturing. He's still Steve McQueen. But it just in its best moments, I really feel like it really captures the same feeling of what I like about something like Dazed and Confused, where you are at this place at this time, and all that matters is what's going on right then at that time. I'm not going to say this is as good as Dazed and Confused, but it captures that feeling for me in those moments.
It reminded me of I was a big fan of Everybody Gets Some, the Linklater film about the college baseball players. Mm-hmm. And one of my dear friends who saw it and admires Linklater as much as I do said, "It's fine, but it reminded me why I hated hanging around with jocks." And I was like, yes, that's exactly. I understand why you have that feeling. I don't share that because they don't bother me, but that's what this felt like. It was like, okay, I am at this party. And, and I have to admit, for me, I could have stopped watching it about the 20-minute mark and it'd have been perfect. Like, I agree with you. It's watching the whole process of setting it up and getting ready, and then through the performance of and the full dance through of Kung Fu Fighting, which is a song I adore. Not ironically, I think it's a fantastic dance. It's funny, it's great, it's fantastic. And to watch that entire dance sequence, I was like, I could stop now. This is all I need. I don't need any more. You have succeeded in this perfect short story, this perfect tone poem. And then there's another 50 minutes. Which I'm like, okay, you're going to give me some characters. That's fine. I'm going to confess, I was never emotionally involved with anybody. And not to say I disliked them. I just didn't gravitate towards anybody. It went where I expected it to go from McQueen. Mm-hmm. It addressed the things I was like, okay, yeah, okay, well, yes, there you are. Yep, there you are. Yep, okay. And so, I was very happy to see it. I was very happy to know he's capable of something else. And the thing that's going to bother me going forward is if I know he's capable of something else, it's going to bother me if he continues to be as he always was. Because then it's not a question of, oh, you can't do anything else. It's you're choosing to do this. Sure. Why are you choosing to do this?
Smile a little bit. I wasn't really, there's a love story that kind of weaves its way through. And I don't know that I was ever super invested in that. But the sequence that I really appreciated, really liked, was when there's someone who at the dance who's been drinking a little too much. And he starts, kind of picking a fight. and the fight gets, kind of calmed down, but it's all done without any dialogue or without you understanding exactly what people are saying, but just the dynamics of how they plays out feels so genuine and natural. I really liked that. It's really an experiential film.
Yes.
If it stops and talks too much, yeah, you can kind of, the emotional investment kind of wears off. But man, when that party's going, it is so much fun to watch.
Oh, you are there. Mm-hmm. You are there, and I mean that in the best possible way. It's a fantastic short piece.
Now, have you seen any of the other Small Axe films he's done?
I have not. Okay. I don't know. I should. I fully grant I should. I don't know when that's going to happen.
I would say this one's definitely an outlier. This is the only one that is not based on a true story. The rest are all about, historical moments or historical figures. This is actually, I think, inspired by McQueen's aunt and the parties she would go to. But I would definitely recommend the first episode. I've been arguing these are actual movies.
That's what Amazon calls them.
Yeah.
So you might as well call them episodes because that's how people are going to find them.
So the first episode, Mangrove, is a 2-hour movie. It's a 2-hour courtroom drama. And I loved that one as well. It is pretty fantastic, especially if you've seen the Trial of the Chicago 7, which we've talked about on this show. It's an interesting one to stack right up next to that one. I actually think I prefer Mangrove to Trial of the Chicago 7. And then I've seen Red, White, and Blue, which is the third episode. And that has a fantastic performance by John Boyega.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah. He's really good, but it is definitely all of those people cry after sex movie.
Yes, that's McQueen's universe.
It's a little bit back into that. But yeah, Lovers Rock. I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad we got to talk about it. That was near the top of my list through most of voting. I was really hoping more people would see that. And then we have the third film, which is also music related. Sound of Metal, Darius Marder's debut. Perry, you want to tell the good people what this one is about?
This follows a metal drummer, a heavy metal drummer who is traveling around the Midwest. It's kind of the Midwest.
Yeah.
Middle East, West, somewhere. Playing gigs with his girlfriend. He's the drummer. She's the guitarist, singer. And really early in the movie, he loses his hearing. And because just, one trauma is not enough for a movie anymore, he's also a former addict. So we're going to wrestle with the fact that he can't hear anymore, and that makes him want to drink and do drugs. And he ends up living in a deaf commune and trying to piece his life back together there. I watched about 20 minutes of it and then went and looked up who was behind it and realized, oh, that's why this feels familiar. This feels like a Derek C. and France movie. And it is.
Yes.
The hero wrote it while doing reads, as I understand it,
Place Behind the
Pines was doing research for him for some other story. Like they were thinking about doing this as I guess a docudrama. It's sort of loosely based on a real person.
Okay.
That they found, and then they fashioned into a fictional script. And boy, if you were a fan of The Place Beyond the Pines, this is going to feel really familiar. And I quite like that movie. I quite love the first 2/3 of that movie. It is all those things I like. It is elliptical. There isn't a ton of backstory. You settle in on the behavior of this character, and Riz Ahmed is very good in it. He's getting all sorts of year-end buzz. He's probably going to get nominated for the Oscar. He is not undeserving. It's a good performance. Mm-hmm. It's a good performance, helped along greatly by a very good script. I think anybody playing this part would be getting nominated for an Oscar. That is not a knock on Riz Ahmed in the slightest. He missteps not at all. And it again, like we're saying, it plays. It is interesting to be in this world. You are you are treated to, it's that classic thing where he is our audience surrogate. We are following him into this world that is strange. We are learning it as he learns it. And in doing so, makes you very empathetic about people who have a hearing loss. This is a sneaky empathetic movie that pays off in a final sequence that is absolutely perfect. And you can also see coming a mile off if you're paying any attention at all.
Yeah.
There's only one way this movie's going to end. I like it a great deal. I am short of loving it. I don't want to call it great, but it's very good. It's a fantastic first film. Love a good first film. I shouldn't say I haven't seen Riz Ahmed in anything. I saw Nightcrawler. I don't remember him at all from Nightcrawler, but I didn't like Nightcrawler nearly as much as a lot of other people.
Okay. I oddly enough, I don't remember him in Nightcrawler, which is weird because I like Nightcrawler quite a bit. But I first saw Riz Ahmed in Four Lions a few years back. I don't know
which I have not seen.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
I love. He also did an HBO miniseries called The Night Of,
which I want to watch, and I have not yet. So,
he's really good in, John. But he's really good. But he's also up against John Turturro, who is flat out fantastic. I like him. I think he's fantastic here. Like you said, I think anyone would be, getting all the raves, but he is fantastic. He's angry by turns, but he's also a very calm actor when he needs to be. And I think he sells kind of this turmoil he's going through. Because what I was really worried about, this is a movie that I held off on when it first came out until I kind of was like, that release date is coming up. I need to review this. I need to sit down and watch this. I thought it was going to be the triumph over the odds movie, right? That like builds to some big emotional crescendo where there's victory and tears. And I didn't want to see that. I've seen that movie before. And then, as you kind of alluded to, when I learned he's also an alcoholic, I'm like, I know beat for beat where this movie's going. There's going to be, the relapse and all. The movie doesn't do that. What I love is that this is not a movie about someone who is just, how do I get back to the way life is before? He's like that. But the whole point is he's wrestling with change. He's wrestling with the fact that he has this thing that he depends on to keep him steady, to keep him dry, to keep him sane. And it's taken away. That plan is taken away from him. And it's how do you move forward with your life? And watching it last fall, like when we're in the midst of everything kind of going to shit, was like, oh, okay, I feel this. I can empathize even more with this.
Yeah, it is beautifully timed.
It really is just grappling with change. It's not how do you overcome something. It's how do you live with this change to your life, which the movie very wisely and pointedly makes a statement that it's not, they don't view it as a handicap. It's the way they live. Right. It's the way he's supposed to live. It really would make an interesting companion piece with, did you see Soul, the Disney movie?
I haven't yet. I need to.
Okay. Very thematically similar.
Okay.
But yeah, I love that that's what this movie is. It just lets him, it's this wrestling of, this new normal he's in. Also, I think while Riz Ahmed is fantastic, it's Paul Raci or Raci. I can't figure out how to pronounce the last name, but he plays the mentor that Ruben meets at the deaf community.
Yes.
And he is so good. He is the heart of the movie for me.
Yeah, he is superb. There's no doubt about it. And like you were saying, I love how it, there are beats you expect, pun intended. And then there are beats that go elsewhere, which is one of the things I really like about Derek C. and Francis movies in general. He does that. He's able to set you in a situation that you've seen before, but he's tackling it in a different way than you expect. And that's really great. I love the fact that, like I said, the wind went out of my sails for a second when we discover he's an addict too. And then you realize, oh no, he's mostly recovered. he's been in recovery for a long time. He has figured out how to put his life back together, like you were saying. And there isn't really this threat that he's going to relapse. That's not, you would expect that melodramatic thread to run through it. And it's not there at all. It shows up again in a really interesting way. They don't ignore it. It's absolutely addressed within the movie, but not in any sort of obvious way or any way that you expect, which is why one of the reasons I really like the film a lot. I love that, you spend so much time in that commune, and then the last act of the movie is gone. Like, we're not there anymore.
Yeah.
Like, that's just part of the journey. And I actually really love the film's third act. I love it when he makes a very important decision that prompts the last act of the movie and goes on another journey to another place we haven't been to before in the movie. I'm avoiding spoilers. I love that sequence a lot. That was where it pays off for me of how much I am invested in his character and how intrigued I am by him. It's a really strong script. It's a really original script. It's a really strong piece of work all the way around. The
thing we haven't discussed about it, though, is the sound design.
Yes.
The way that it gets you into his head, and I think the way they said is it's not a point of view, it's a point of sound they wanted to have.
Yes.
And I found that very effective, but not overbearing. Like, there's a way to do that where it's gimmicky. And I never found it gimmicky. I found it just very effective at helping us understand how Ruben was approaching the world through this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's, again, if you're paying attention, necessary because you know what the end of this film has to be.
Mm-hmm. Olivia Cook.
It's really smart.
Oh, sorry. Olivia Cook, also very good in this.
Yes, as the girlfriend.
And I think their relationship is very, very well handled. And again, it's a movie that doesn't go where I thought it would go, and when it does take those, it takes a different route to places I thought it would go.
Yeah, yes. Much like the first 2/3 of Play on the Pines. If you haven't seen that, I really recommend. I think it's still on Netflix.
I have seen Place Behind the Pines, but I think I watched it. I've talked about this before, how you have those days where there's about 10 screeners and you just pop it in one after the other. So I remember very little about it.
The first 2/3 of it do what this movie does all the way through. Like I was saying, it is a situation that you've seen, just not quite like that. Mm-hmm. And it moves in places I do not expect. The problem is, the last third of that movie is really there's only one place it can go, and that's where it goes. And this movie kind of has the same thing, except it's just the last scene. What the last scene of this movie is going to be if you're paying attention at all, and it is, and it's really well done. It's not a knock. It's not a surprise ending. It doesn't need to be. I'm not saying it's a problem, but it is. He's almost too airtight in his screenplays, which is a weird complaint to make because while it's a film that would seem to be everything I want in a movie, I really dislike his first film. I dislike Blue Valentine a lot. I think Blue Valentine is everything that people complain about that kind of movie. It does feel like a series of acting exercises. I don't believe them as people. As good as Ryan Gosling and Michelle Williams are in that film, it never feels weighted to real life in any way. It feels like a series of acting exercises, which is a bummer because I really wanted to love that movie. I was so excited to see that movie and so disappointed in it.
Talk about a movie where people cry after sex.
Yes. Yeah. But it's not really pretentiously. It's really intimately.
Yeah.
There's subtle differences. So yeah, I am intrigued. I probably shouldn't be giving Cian Francis as much publicity in this as I have, but it so feels like one of his movies that I don't know how else to categorize it. I'd like to see what Martyr does next, and if he continues to work with him.
I agree. Do we have anything else to say on this one?
I don't.
Yeah, it's these are 3 movies that you should just stop listening to our show now.
Yeah,
and go watch them. They are all
worth
seeing. I feel like I feel like with all of our 2020 catch-ups, this has kind of been the happy accident. Like there hasn't been one where I've had people say, you need to see this movie. And I've seen the movie and gone, why did you make me watch that? They've been mostly movies that I've really enjoyed or really loved. So that's what's been fun about this. And it kind of dispels this notion that I feel people had where 2020 was a bad year for movies. I think it was a very good year for movies. If for the movies we got to see, I guess.
Yes, it was a good year. All things considered, It was a good year. Yes.
All right. Well, you can watch Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always on HBO Max. You can watch Lovers Rock on Amazon Prime, and I believe Sound of Metal is an Amazon Prime film as well.
All right. Well, that's excellent. We have clicked off all the sponsors. Thank you.
We have.
No, we're not being paid by anybody.
Oh, you're not?
You've been holding out on me.
I would have been able to get a better Zencaster quality for the last episode if it was. Perry, before we get into where people can find you, they can find both of us recently on our buddy Nate Adams' podcast, Picks and Pans, talking about Paramount Plus.
Wow, that's a lot of peas.
Yes, it is.
And you can find me at Perry Loves Film on Twitter, on Facebook. You can hear me every Friday morning on the Lucy Ann Lance Show on WLBY, 1290 AM in the great city of Ann Arbor. I'm always somewhere in some streaming service swimming, trying to find something to watch.
You can find me on Twitter at Mere Christianity. You can find me on Facebook at Criticisms. You can subscribe to my newsletter, which is Criticisms over at Substack. And Perry, let me know if this name sounds familiar to you. Okay. I just launched a website called Far From Hollywood.
Wait a second.
That was our podcast before this.
Yes, it was.
That is where you can find my writing about film. You can find my Spielberg series there, which I am going to restart in the next few weeks. Right now, you can find my review of Raya and the Last Dragon on there. We will be back in 2 weeks, and we'll catch you then.